Squad vs Project Reality is a tale as old as time. An aged story of two brothers, one older and wiser, dedicated to the ways of teamwork, squad play, and slower gameplay. The other, a young maverick, tired of the old ways and looking to take the ancient squad-based tactical shooter into a bold new direction, full of quick, run-and-gun gameplay, devoid of teamwork or meaning, designed to appeal to a new, young audience. For years, the division between these two brothers frustrated me. I've always loved Project Reality, but I am well aware that the game is old, jank, and built on an infrastructure that will likely be unsupportable by modern technology within the next 10 years. Myself, like many, have long wished that Squad, a game once deemed Project Reality's spiritual successor, would adopt the Project Reality style, slowing down the game, increasing opportunities for teamwork, and doing away with modern solo run-and-gun tropes that plague most modern shooters. To my shock, having played the recent Squad Combat Overhaul playtest, I can say confidently that the game has finally become the Squad we've always dreamed of, thanks to the developers' sudden and unprecedented commitment to implementing many Project Reality mechanics into their game. In this video, I will be presenting a detailed comparison between Squad's playtest build and Project Reality, looking primarily at the suppression and deviation mechanics in both, and offering a fresh 2023 perspective on the states of both of these games and how I see their place in the market in the future. This video is going to be a bit of a heifer, so strap in, hit like and subscribe, and let's go. With the recent Squad Combat Overhaul came 3 pivotal new mechanics that completely shift the game to the point where this feels less like a patch for Squad and more like the release of Squad 2. This wholly tactical shooter mechanic trifecta is deviation, suppression, and picture-in-picture scopes. Both Squad and the mighty Project Reality now employ their own version of deviation. The deviation mechanic is a way of adding variance to where your shots land, meaning just because your crosshair is on the target doesn't always mean your shots will land there. This variance is dependent on a number of factors, namely player movement, scope movement, the frequency of the player's shots, and suppression. In both Project Reality and the new Squad, deviation is represented by 2 white bars at the bottom of your screen. The further away the bars are, the more variance there will be in your shots. In Project Reality, I've been saying for years that this one mechanic has set the game apart from any other shooter, forcing the player to consider their shots and their movements, and dissuading simply sprinting across the map, solo shooting everything that moves. However, Squad's implementation of deviation has far surpassed Project Reality, mainly because Squad's deviation is actually visible in the scope. In Squad, as you can see, after coming out of a full sprint, for example, your weapon is heavily deviated. You can clearly see this from the position of these 2 white bars. But you can also see this when bringing up the scope, where it's very clearly all over the shop. This is a vital progressive step for the mechanic. In Project Reality, it can often feel like you're a slave to deviation and that it inhibits gameplay. You feel this because when you bring up your scope, the game says your deviation is really high, but through the optic, a heavily deviated scope looks exactly the same as looking through the optic of someone who's been lying down perfectly still for the last 10 minutes. Squad has fixed this problem, and you can feel it. In the new Squad, deviation very much feels present, but it never feels like I'm spending the game staring at the bottom of my screen, waiting for these 2 bars to come together, and instead offers a much more fluid experience where you have the option of taking engagements with bad deviation, but you're still punished for this, and managing your deviation is heavily promoted. This leads us nicely on to suppression, another incredibly important mechanic found in Project Reality that now finds itself heavily implemented in the new Squad. Suppression is not just something women experience, it's also a mechanic in games whereby, as you take indirect fire, your screen goes all blurry, making it harder to see and return accurate fire. This is a very important mechanic for any tactical shooter worth its salt, as it rewards the player or squad that shoots first, and also offers up teamwork opportunities where squads can work together to suppress targets with indirect fire while other squad members move and reposition. This also heavily favours a more team-oriented playstyle, as a solo run-and-gun player is at a huge disadvantage in any shootout with a squad, as a suppressed player will struggle to return accurate fire. While both the new Squad and Project Reality have suppression mechanics, once again I feel Squad has both successfully implemented and greatly improved on the idea. In Project Reality, suppression looks like this. It's pretty basic, but it does the job. However, in PR, suppression with a 9mm pistol looks exactly the same as suppression from a 50 caliber machine gun, which I don't necessarily see as a problem. But Squad's new system elevates this. In Squad, suppression comes in a few forms. A stray round flying past your head will actually cause your soldier to duck down, and depending on which side of your head it passes by, you'll duck in a different direction, which is a nice touch and a great way of improving a player's understanding of where they're being shot from without having random red arrows or hit markers on the screen. The next level of suppression comes from small arms and rifles and blurs your screen, but not as much as the ultimate suppression, which you can create using heavy and mounted machine guns. This is a hugely important progression for the mechanic, as it helps to more clearly define the roles of certain classes in a squad. In Project Reality, while a machine gunner can more effectively suppress an area because they have more bullets in a mag and also have a bipod, their suppression is no greater than a pistol. And the accuracy of a deployed machine gun actually heavily favours the weapon for use as a fully automatic marksman as opposed to a suppression device. In Squad, the added suppression value of these weapons gives these classes a whole new lease of life as more of a fire support class, and further improves squad dynamics and team play opportunities. But it gets better. In Squad, unlike PR, suppression actually affects your deviation, meaning a player being suppressed will struggle to return accurate fire, not just because of a visual impairment, but also because of weapon stability. I absolutely love this, as again, the mechanic is just doubling down on the idea that running solo will get you turned to dust, and moving as a team is not just a suggestion, but near enough a requirement. And the final mechanic of the holy trifecta, picture-in-picture scopes, or PIP scopes for short. As the Squad developers mentioned in their original blog post on this update, the future of immersive shooters is grounded in the PIP scope meta, a modern mechanic you can already see in a number of modern shooters. Now, for anyone who's played Project Reality, you'll know it's about to get smoked, cooked, and roasted in this category, as the game is 18 years old and built on an engine that both has no picture-in-picture scopes and I would assume has absolutely no way of implementing them. Sorry PR, but in this regard, you're really showing your age. But I'll be honest, having played some modern shooters with PIP scopes, I've often found myself wondering, is this really necessary? And this is where Squad has really impressed me, because their use of these scopes hasn't just been based on the fact that it looks cool or is a bit more realistic, it actually works with the deviation and suppression system to further ground those mechanics and improve on the overall goal of the update to slow down the game and create longer team-based engagements. In the new Squad, most weapons have a lot of recoil, a lot of deviation, and are very hard to fire full auto, especially when standing. But the beauty of the PIP scope is that you can see this visually represented, so it doesn't feel like your shots are going in totally random directions. You can actually see how the scope isn't lined up with the barrel, or when a misalignment is present, which just isn't really possible without this mechanic. What's even crazier is that with this system, looking down your scope becomes a whole skill in itself. Try to scope and crouch at the same time. You're blind. Try to scope and spin 180 degrees. You're blind. Think back to that time where that girl was really into you but you didn't realize, and only now looking back is it clear that she would have banged you on the spot? You're blind. This also makes choosing a scope versus iron sights or a close range optic an actual decision instead of scope simply being the best option every time. While I'd argue that this is the least game-changing element of the three mechanics, it is also the most visually interesting part, and frankly, I'd imagine the unique selling point that would shift Squad sales more than anything else. So is Project Reality doomed? Has Squad become the new unrivaled king of the tactical swinger zone? It's a tough call. It's important to remember that Project Reality has player-manned jets and attack helicopters, as well as a fun, dedicated community that's hard to find in most shooters. Squad certainly still feels like it's somewhat lacking in the content department. Let's also not forget that Project Reality is completely free, while Squad still hovers at around £40. Project Reality also runs on most PC systems just fine, while Squad is still very poorly optimized and, while improved from its level of optimization a year ago, has a long way to go to be fully accessible on a wide range of systems. One final point of consideration, the changes I've gone over in this video for Squad were all part of a playtest and are not officially implemented in the live game, meaning all changes are open to alteration. So the Squad I've showcased today may not be the Squad I'm happy to support in a few months' time. But with all these caveats in mind, Squad certainly looks to be one of the best, if not the best tactical shooter available. I've said this before, but I'm still shocked they've made such sweeping changes and am beyond excited to see where they take this. There's no doubt in my mind that the combat changes have drastically improved the game and turned it into a Project Reality successor I'd be proud to play. There's still certainly a place for Project Reality to exist within the space, but I'd wager that this patch, when it does finally drop, may be the turning point that brings a bunch of Project Reality players across to Squad, and also something that brings many players who abandoned Squad back into the fold. What do you think? Has the new Squad update pushed you over the edge? Are you finally ready to make the Squad plunge? Or have these new mechanics simply ruined the game for you completely? Perhaps you're a die-hard Project Reality player bound to the Battlefield 2 mod until the end of time. Let me know in the comments down below. If you made it this far into the video and you still haven't liked and subscribed, rest assured, me and my pipscope are coming for you. Do it. Other than that, all the best, and I hope to see you in the next one.